You think you know what being rich looks like, but your brain has never truly understood the scale of extreme wealth. Today, we're going to visualize the distance between you and the richest people on Earth. And, trust me, it will completely change how you think about money.
It's 11:43 p.m., and you are staring at a $1,247 balance on a second-hand mattress. You have $31,000 in student loans, $4,000 on a credit card, and a paycheck coming Friday that is already spent. At this level, money is the air you breathe. You're either getting enough or you're suffocating, and the math never stops running in the background. You put the olive oil back and buy the store brand because every grocery run is a calculation. You don't talk about money, but you know your account number by heart. You assume this is a problem of volume. You tell yourself that if you could just make more, the arithmetic would stop and the anxiety would resolve. You think the game stays the same, just with bigger numbers. But capital has its own physics. As you scale, the rules change. The survival instincts that got you to your first 10,000 will eventually become liabilities. Moving to the top requires you to rewrite how you value your time, how you perceive risk, and how you relate to other people. Reaching the summit isn't about saving your way to a large number. It is about whether you can survive a machine that requires you to become a different person to keep the gears turning. At $10,000, the survival loop breaks. For the first time, you have 5 figures. You stop viewing your bank app with fear and start viewing it as data. You move from the emotional decisions of the poor to the cold information of the builder. You sit down at midnight and run the numbers. You see that 40 years of disciplined saving at your current salary gets you to a finish line that is enough, but it isn't what you actually want. This is the competence plateau. You've mastered the art of surviving, but you haven't started building. You find leverage in the gap between your salary and your assets. You start a side project that earns while you sleep. When your investments return more in a year than your previous raises combined, you finally understand what an asset actually is. Social friction starts to build. You say no to the group holidays and the destination weddings because you've started measuring hours by their compounding value. You stop explaining your decisions to people who only see the price tag and not the opportunity cost. You stop using your capital to maintain relationships and start using it to buy options. You've realized that a salary is just a ceiling someone else built for you. By 300,000, your money has a personality. It wants to be in certain places and resists others. You lose $9,000 on a bad move and you don't panic. You see the loss as the math of being in the game, a necessary cost of staying at the table. You hit $1 million and wait for the feeling of freedom. It doesn't come. You realize $1 million is a proof of concept, not a destination. At a 4% return, it's just $40,000 a year. You are only at the starting line. You stop attending the networking events and the seminars where everyone talks about what they're building. You move into smaller rooms where no one wears a name badge and the conversations are about the actual cost of the climb. At $5 million, you stop working for the money and you start positioning it. The distinction is everything. You enter 2 opposing deals simultaneously. You know one might return nothing while the other returns $800,000. The goal isn't to win every hand. It's to engineer a position where the correlation between the 2 risks keeps your capital safe. At this level, wealth is measured by what you no longer have to do. You buy back your time. You take a 3-week trip and spend 5 days without checking a single notification, a luxury that people at lower levels literally cannot afford. At 10 million, a distance opens up between you and the consequences of your choices. A company in your portfolio restructures and 140 people lose their jobs. You know the CFO, but you don't call him. You look at the margin profile and watch the value of your position climb. The sheer scale of the numbers acts as a silencer. When the gap between a decision and its impact becomes wide enough, the human cost becomes a data point on a spreadsheet. You don't resist the detachment. You accept it as the price of the reach you've built. You stop thinking in quarters and start thinking in cycles. You look at demographic shifts and infrastructure credit 30 years out. You position your capital ahead of these waves, reading the macro weather like a sailor reads the horizon. Because you are positioned ahead of the cycle, You can reshape a mid-sized economy with a 4-minute board meeting. You don't need spectacle or volume. The room simply calibrates to your position. Beyond 50 million, money is no longer a measure of who you are. It is an instrument of how far you can reach. You reach 94 million. You exist at an altitude where conventional reality doesn't reach. You have not worked a conventional day in 9 years, and yet you have never actually stopped working. Your life is protected by trusts and foundations that will outlast your name. You give away millions, partly because it provides access, but mostly because giving is one of the few remaining things that feels like a real decision. The isolation isn't loneliness, it's untranslatability. Your daily reality, regulatory carve-outs, and dynasty structures simply does not translate to the people who knew you before. You're not a different person, but your context has become a different language. Somewhere, a 24-year-old is opening a banking app. He sees $1,247. He's doing math for the week, putting the good coffee back. He thinks this is a story about money. He doesn't see the wedge. He doesn't realize that the machine that grows the money also creates a silent, growing chasm between who he is now and who he will have to become to reach the end. The machine doesn't ask if the trade is worth it. It just compounds the capital and the distance at the same rate. And it always starts with that same balance of $1,247.